Hello, this is the Green Corn Rebellion show. I'm Gregory Harden II, and today I am here with Matt Lech. He is the co-host of Left Reckoning with David Griscom. He's the host of Literary Hangover podcast, producer and contributor on the Majority Report, and the forever producer and contributor on the Michael Brooks Show. I'll also add that he is one of my biggest influences when it comes to me doing my show.
Oh, thank you, Gregory. I'm very honored and flattered by your words there.
Yeah. Whoa. Stop what you're doing. Okay. If you like this video and you like the other content on my channel, please hit the like button on this video. Also, go hit subscribe like right now. And also, when you hit subscribe, click the bell so you can get notifications whenever I put out a new video. So, thanks. All right, enjoy the rest of the video.
And always TMBS, that's right.
Yeah. It's funny because whenever I was like writing this stuff down earlier today, I forgot Literary Hangover, and I was like, oh wait, let me add that in there. He does a lot. You do a lot. You do too much almost.
A little bit, yeah. Left Reckoning really, to kind of carry on the TMBS stuff. But the truth is that takes a lot of work, actually, and a lot more from me and David, obviously, because Michael's irreplaceable, guy. And so I'm still putting out Literary Hangover. I'm going to be doing one about John Milton, the poet, and how actually he was, everyone kind of remembers him as this sort of like religious guy, but he was actually pretty based. He justified the beheading of Charles I after it happened. But anyway, so yeah, Literary Hangover is still going, but just about one episode a month. Maybe every couple of months at this point, but that's my labor of love. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, so first question I have here is, where are you from and where did you grow up?
I was born and raised in Mandan, North Dakota, which is a town across the Missouri River from Bismarck, the state capital of North Dakota. And I lived there through high school. I went to Mandan High, and then I went to college. Lived in Fargo, North Dakota for college, going to a school called Minnesota State University in Moorhead, just right across the border into Minnesota. And I went there for 5 years. I remember actually my freshman year, Lehman Brothers had collapsed earlier that spring or whatever, and so it was the financial crisis, and that was a time where basically like the idea of going to grad school seemed like a good idea, because the jobs weren't there. I have a lot of student loan debt now, but ultimately that worked out pretty well for me because I went to New York University for grad school. That's why I moved to Brooklyn, New York in 2012 now. And I've been here ever since.
All right, that's cool. Also, random question: is that a Bernie shirt from 2016 or from 2020?
Yes, so 2016. Okay. Bernie.
I thought so because the color, that was what made me think. Okay, I think that's from 2016 because I don't think they did use that color in 2020, but it's for a different shirt. I think it was the Students for Bernie shirt was that color. But yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, that's cool. So it means you're like about 10 years older than me. Maybe.
Yeah, just turned 33.
Okay. Oh yeah. So you're about 10 years older than me. So
yep.
Yeah. All right. That adds up. Interesting. Let's see. Because I'll be 24 in February. So
oh nice.
Yeah. Yep, I'm getting up there.
So ahead of where I was.
Yeah. So episodes of the Green Corn Rebellion show are sponsored by Oklahoma Progress Now. Oklahoma Progress Now is a 501c4 organization focused on building progressive power in Oklahoma. Their primary efforts are on developing progressive content for a 21st century audience, coalition, and capacity building across progressive organizations and causes, and working to see elected leaders who are more responsive to their constituents and the needs of the many. Areas of focus include progressive messaging and communications, coalition building and resource sharing, and focused progressive policy goals. You can check out their Twitch live streams, and they go live on Facebook on at noon, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Please support this organization. It's a really great organization. It's just getting started here in Oklahoma. Thank you. Now enjoy the rest of the video. So, how did you form your politics and become a leftist?
Yeah, so I would say in high school, I didn't have an ideological family one way or the other. My parents were the type of folks that they voted Clinton and voted Bush, just kind of the currents of general politics. They watch the news, but they don't get invested in. They take pride. North Dakotans generally, and this has changed a little bit with Trump and stuff, but North Dakotans generally, even though they will vote conservative, they like to think of themselves as independent. That's why we have an independent governor who's a businessman who just, governs like a Republican. But so I would say I started becoming politically aware during the. I'd say I generally had a pro-America stance, and like 9/11 happened, right? And that was pretty crazy. And I remember I just gotten the TV in my bedroom by the time shock and awe was happening. We were going to invade Iraq a couple years later, and I watched the shock and awe campaign, and like I felt weird about it. I wanted to feel like, hell yeah, we're getting these guys, right? Like I don't know, like a Saving Private Ryan, like we talked about today on Majority Report, but like really what it was is bombs going off in a city, and you see it on like night vision, and that felt odd.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to be get access to a sports talk radio station from Minneapolis, Minneapolis KFAN, it's called. And they had like the Timberwolves, Vikings, and Twins coverage, but they also had during the day these talk radio guys that would talk sports, but they would also talk about current events and stuff. Dan Barreau, Dan Cole, like these guys. It was, and they were all pretty much anti the invasion, or at least that's my memory. Maybe they were less anti than I remember, but that's when I turned, I think. And the Daily Show also played an influence. People, I mean, Jon Stewart sucks; he's a union buster. But the Daily Show, I think, did play a pretty key role in a political education that led, I think, a lot of people graduate from it. But it's still like that sort of thing. I watched a lot of that, a lot of like, basically in high school, I liked that sort of like satire stuff. So Phil Hendry is this other radio show guy who used to do these prank phone calls where he would do both him, the radio host, and also this crazy character. And then people would call in thinking the crazy character is real, and he would try to like, play both of them off each other. And so the high school, like, it was really through radio, honestly, that I got the political awareness. And then I'd say I had a little bit of a new atheist phase in college, where I was into like Christopher Hitchens was a big influence around this time, leading to Richard Dawkins and a lot of science stuff. And then I realized that, the science stuff is good, but it's ultimately like hostage to the political stuff. And if you don't talk about the political stuff, you're not talking about anything. And so that's when I got into, I should back up. I read Karl Marx, The German Ideology. I got assigned that text in class in undergraduate philosophy. And that was also during the financial crisis. And I remember at that time it was taught like this is a dead language, almost like it's Latin, like Marxism. And it's funny, like I'd say like every day since then, it's just seemed more and more relevant to like understanding the world. And that slowly, I'd say that seed started during Obama administration. I'd I'd say like that's when I became more of like a socialist slash the commie, something like that.
All right, that's interesting. Yeah, whenever I was a kid, my parents they watched the news a lot, and also The Daily Show and Stephen Colbert. Like
Yeah.
I remember watching that a lot. And it's some pretty good stuff. I know a lot of it hasn't aged well, I'm sure. But like, a lot of the general sentiments and things that they satirized and highlighted back then were pretty important. I think even today I would still say like what Jon Stewart did is probably better than what Trevor Noah's doing now, but
Oh yeah.
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 But uh, let's see. But yeah,
Well, that's the thing. Like Jon Stewart, like him coming out against the war. I
mhm,
mean, I don't even remember like him doing this, but I remember like an anti-war position as part of the show, where like they lied to us, like elaborating those sorts of positions.
yeah.
It's only really safe to do comedically. Like people's careers get under threat for that if you do that on a news station. So it was important in a way. Like Trevor Noah, like we don't need it's unnecessary. We have plenty of people saying what Trevor Noah is trying to say, and they don't have like corporate sponsorship,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So let's see. So like you were able to vote in 2008. Did you vote in the '08 election or
I did. I voted for Obama in 08.
okay. Um yeah, I wasn't able to vote in that election, but I paid
Right.
attention to it. I wanted Obama to win. Um
Yeah,
and
me too.
then
I wanted
uh
Obama to win
yeah.
because of the war stuff.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah. Did
like
you vote in the primary as well or just in the general?
no, I didn't vote in the
Just in
primary,
okay.
just in the general. But like I was paying attention enough to it. Ironically, I mean that's when I first heard of Jeffrey Epstein, because that was becoming a liability for Hillary back then.
Oh wow.
People were talking about it. Like there's stories about it. But yeah, I definitely I definitely bought the Obama thing. I had no like, and I wasn't a politically savvy person at this point, so I wasn't like prepared for the ways he'd be sort of like corrupted by banks and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Like I just thought like this is awesome. I remember me and some other like Obama voters got into the faces of McCain voters on our floor, saying like suck it and stuff like that. Like it was fun. I like that part of it. I had a lot of fun actually both times. Obama
Yeah.
won re-election. I actually enjoyed it, got very intoxicated both times and enjoyed myself.
That's fun. Yeah, I remember I was 10. I was in fifth grade whenever the '08 election happened.
Right.
And like it was definitely interesting. Um and then I was in high school when he won re-election. The second time around though, like I wasn't as like I was kind of down on Obama by 2012. I was like, I mean, I guess like he's definitely better than Mitt Romney and whatever the Republicans are serving up, but
Right.
no,
That's it.
I'm not too pleased with his with Obama's performance over the last 4 years either, but I'll take him. Uh
Yeah.
that was like my like stance. I would say the majority of my political awakening was like the first 4 or 5 Obama like years of the Obama years, because
Mm-hmm.
like I was raised as a Democrat, progressive but still Democrat. My governor at the time in Oklahoma, he was from my hometown. He was a Democrat, and so I was pretty already fixtured into that mindset of being a Democrat. But then whenever I saw the way that the Democrats governed with a majority, I was like, okay, so these blue dogs are definitely a problem. And then and maybe not just the
Right.
blue dogs, but also the people who kind of enable the blue dogs, and
Yeah.
and now I see what's going on, and I'm just like, oh, imagine if this was like if Biden won like Obama did in '08. Would they be doing like the same kind of games? Like, would they still be able to do like the same thing, and they probably would. I mean, like, they just have less people to like shuffle the blame on now, but back then it was like, a few more people, but
Well,
no,
yeah,
that
I mean
was,
that's
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean the thing about that is like I feel the same way. I was happy, one, because I'd put money on Obama being Romney, and two, because yeah, it's just like you beat the Republicans.
yeah,
And like that seems shallow, but it's also like to imagine for a moment that Hillary beat Trump in 2016. We would be, frankly, like where we're at with Biden now, we would have got there with Hillary too, because it would have been clear that she wasn't going to do shit. It
yeah,
would have been clear that like there needs to be a confrontation with the money that controls the Democratic Party 4 years earlier,
yep,
right? And they wouldn't have, and what they also wouldn't have this scary Trump in the pocket thing, where like now that's all they're going to run on in the 2024, right, is that Trump is scary.
yeah,
And they wouldn't have that, because it's like, well, you've won 3 straight elections, like what's stop complaining about the GOP, right? You could have
yeah,
said like the GOP threat is gone. So like it's not that Democrats winning is a cause for a celebration in and of itself, but it is like the most clarifying, right? Because you
yeah,
see like what's going on now, where like what has to be done about student loan debts. Like if Trump was still in office, they would have done the exact same thing as restart payments.
yeah,
I if anyone wants to make the counter argument, I would love to hear that.
yeah,
But I'm pretty sure Trump would be all ears to the restart the payments thing too. And then the Democrats would be, sending out fundraising emails saying, hey, if you want us to get in there and stop student loan stuff, we just vote us in. And now they can't do that, right? So like, funny
yeah,
thing is this is like, as far as electoral politics go, this is almost the most clarifying of all worlds. And what we do with it is, the problem. It might lead to a big GOP landslide, and
yeah,
and we're back where we are. But yeah, that's my tangent on that.
yeah, because like, what was it? Yeah, that, especially that part about Hillary, like, what is it? People are relitigating the 2016 election because of the Supreme Court, even though, once again, that's like a whole other thing where it's like, no matter how you like try to like talk about the Supreme Court, it's the Democrats' fault. Like, they had agency in several different ways here that like could have prevented what happened, whether it be
Right.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg herself. I mean, in that
Yeah,
instance, it
exactly.
literally is just her. Or right now, currently, Breyer, he didn't retire. I mean, I guess he could retire next year, but why didn't he just retire now? And
No,
they,
that's
yeah,
exactly it. Right.
yeah,
Like, yeah, like, and then we have to play this game. Like the GOP does this, they get their people out and they replace them with like a 40-year-old freak, right? And that's what
yes,
Democrats would be doing if they cared. But fundamentally, I don't think that like the people, I think they're fine with that. Like, I think the powerful in this country was scared of the fact that like the GOP would lose control of the Supreme Court entirely too. And so like, and that includes like members of the Democrats that basically like rolled over and allowed all of this to happen,
yeah,
because it's basically corporate control. So yeah, now we get I forgot where I was going with that, but uh yeah, it's just very disappointing, I guess. And I mean, that's another thing, is the Kavanaugh hearings, where it's like we have the thing where it's like, I believe Kavanaugh is a rapist. I do not believe that was the best moment to air that, because I think it put Christine Blasey Ford basically to be a sacrificial idol, to try to take down this guy,
yeah,
when at the same time Nancy Pelosi and the Senate have decided that we're just not going to let the public know about, say, Brett Kavanaugh's gambling debts and who paid those off, like the like real stuff. I mean,
yeah,
not that the Christine Blasey Ford stuff isn't real, but that was like, if you're going to throw everything at him, throw everything at him. Don't throw Christine Blasey Ford out there and then still have all the stuff in reserve that you're going
yeah.
to keep in like, just for like, we're going to keep under wraps. I mean, it's really disgusting the way.
Yeah,
that stuff is orchestrated.
like they were going to do that with Cuomo as well. They were going to just impeach him over what was the sexual harassment stuff, and not over all those like dead old people in the nursing homes.
Yeah, and the
Like
cover up.
that,
Yeah,
yeah. And it was like, okay, it's like if you're going to impeach him, do both things. There's nothing wrong with doing both. Like both are definitely a problem, and you shouldn't just make it about one. And then yeah, but yeah,
yeah.
it's just
Well, it's like the same way the Trump impeachment
yeah,
became just about things that are useful to, like, war hawks,
yeah, yeah,
Russia war hawks, basically.
yeah. Um, so yeah. Oh yeah, and what was the other thing I was going to mention about North Dakota? So like North Dakota, you guys currently have no Democratic senators, right? Both Republican now?
Yeah, both
Or
Republican.
okay. And what was the last Democratic senator? Was it Heitkamp or was
It would
it
have been Heitkamp,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
Heitkamp, and then Heitkamp beat a guy named Rick Berg, and I think, I don't want to say when it was, but he was like a big time landlord in Fargo, and so that was a surprise. Before then, um, John Hoeven uh, took over. Before John Hoeven and Hurt took over, it was Byron Dorgan and Kent Conrad, which are two. Kent Conrad's like a fiscal blue dog guy. Dorgan, more of a agrarian populist type of guy who famously called the financial deregulation that caused the most recent recession. So like North Dakota, and that's all because it's a very east-west split in North Dakota. You have the Farm Valley on the east, basically between the Missouri and the Red Rivers, and that's the farmers will go probably. I mean, recently, you get a lot of a little bit more MAGA stuff, but farmers, they vote Democrat in at least in North Dakota, and then you get to the west where it's more rancher, loosely speaking, rancher and oil, obviously, and then Air Force Base stuff. Then you get the really red North Dakota.
Hmm, that's interesting. Like I think here in Oklahoma the split used to be before it all just became red counties all across the board.
Right. Yeah.
It was like let's see. It was more like South Oklahoma ish or Southeast ish Oklahoma was like the bluest parts of the state. And then like the rest was like more Republican.
Mhm.
Um, but more like I say South and Southeast, but it's more like East. Kind of depends on what years you're talking about, but like generally it's like the southeastern part of the state, which is also nicknamed Little Dixie. It's it was like Yellow Dog Democrat territory, like you're talking about prior to like the last decade or so. We're talking like 80 to 90% of registered voters are Democrats. They're rubber stamping every Democrat on the ballot, blah blah blah, until like like the 90s, and then it starts getting a little sketchy with who might or might not win. But yeah, and I think for the most part, it was the reason why it was split that way was a lot of it had to do with Native Americans, large Cherokee, I believe Choctaw population out in the eastern part of the state, and several other
Mhm.
tribes as well.
Yeah, those
And
are the only blue counties in North Dakota now at this point too, which is,
yeah,
yeah.
and like um but now in Oklahoma it's like it, some of those counties are like slightly bluer than average, but for the most part, those are all super red counties, and it's like sad to look at because if you like look at pretty much anything, like 90% of anything in this state that is named after somebody is named after a Democrat. Whether it
Right.
be a former Democratic politician or some other famous person who was like a philosopher or writer or something that was a Democrat, just so happened to be a Democrat. It's like pretty wild. And like um what is it? And even some of these counties, the voter registration is still like majority Democrat. They just vote Republican in every single election. But yeah, it's interesting to see how those tides change really quickly over the years, over the last 20 years or so. I want to
Yeah.
say North Dakota is probably a little bit more bluer-ish than Oklahoma, but I'm not sure. I haven't really looked at it too deeply. But
I mean,
like you
certainly
said that
not.
there's blue counties in North Dakota, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's like you
Yeah,
said, like that's disappearing. But I mean,
yeah,
it's still like within my life, I've been in the eastern part of the state. That's where my mom's from, and among like dairy farmers, and I've heard someone say like, I can't believe you admit to voting Republican. And that was like in like that was like maybe like 98 or 99, like maybe it's one of the
wow,
2000s, right? And that's because of like there's a North Dakota does have a populist history through the Democratic Party,
yeah,
starting the state bank, which financed my study abroad in London, a state grain elevator, and then they all decide they realize they're getting fucked over by the railroads, and they band together, right? The classic agrarian populist sort of story. And so that persists, and people know, especially like they know the fucking government, that the libertarian bullshit doesn't play with those folks, because it's like they're taking money to leave a field fallow, right? They're you need help with you realize you're getting effed over by monopolies, so you need collective action that way, and governmental protections that way. You need you're dealing with like the drainage base, like water and like floodplains and that shit. Like libertarian paradise does not exist in farmland, as far as my experience.
yeah.
But I forget where I was going with that. Why did I get off on the?
Talking about the populist streak in North Dakota through the
Oh
Democratic
yeah,
Party. Yeah,
so like that does exist, and like I said, like Standing Rock, and Turtle
yeah,
Mountain areas, like those I mean, the problem is, and there's a few decent indigenous lawmakers who are Democrats. Ruth Hopkins, I believe, is one.
mhm.
I think I'm right about that. But like, so it's there, it's just like swamped by corporate and then a bit of MAGA stuff, which is really disappointing.
Yeah, and same here in Oklahoma. We have populist and even leftist, like socialist streak within our history. What was it? I think we were the state whenever Eugene Debs ran for president one time, we had like the highest percentage of all the states.
Oh, nice.
And the highest number of counties he won as well. I need to look at that again, but I know one of the times he ran was like the highest percentage here in Oklahoma. And let's see, like the Democratic Party here. I read a lot. I've been reading a lot lately as well about like the history of different Democratic politicians here in the state, and there's a lot of them that were like really like progressive and were good on a lot of different issues like labor and even education and stuff like that. And our state constitution is special because like it was made by people who consider themselves partially made by people who consider themselves to be populists. And so, which is why we have the option for a ballot initiative be put on the ballot either by the state legislature or by the people via signature petition. We have direct elections of like the cabinet, the executive cabinet. So not only do we have governor and lieutenant governor that we vote on, we have attorney general, we have a 3-person corporation commission, we have a labor commissioner, we have what else? State superintendent of public schools, we have state auditor. We have like all these different things that like most states don't have. Usually they just have like 3 or 4 different statewide positions. We have like 8 or 9 of them that we vote on.
Mhm.
So like the constitution or state constitution was made to be like almost as democratic as humanly possible. And yeah, it's like some pretty interesting stuff, but now it's kind of, you would have never known that that was a thing if you see what's going on now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um So, how did you end up being on the Majority Report?
So after I graduated from NYU, I spent about a year uh a few jobs here and there, but looking for work and finding it difficult to find it. Eventually I landed at Vice News for a contractor gig, and then this is like summer 2015, I think. And I listening to Majority Report for about a year or two before then, and I just got letting go from Vice, and was looking for, like, oh shit, I'm back into the fucking job hunt cycle again. I have to go write 1,000 cover letters, which makes me sick to just think about. Sorry, anybody going through that right now. um, and I heard the announcement from Matt Binder that he was going to cafe.com, and that they were looking for a new producer. And before that show was even over, I had submitted my shit and heard back. I may, if not that afternoon, the next morning.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went in, had an interview with Sam, and he it seemed very quick. I can't remember if it was over a course of like 3 days, but it feels like it's 3 or 4 days. I got hired and started training with Michael Brooks. So that's the start of me working at Majority Report.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because I didn't start watching the Majority Report until like August of 2017. So it was like,
Okay.
yeah. So I mean, I've listened to the older videos and stuff like that from, before 2016 and even in 2016. Let's see. Um, so what was it like being on the show that you had been watching for a year already? And tell me about your experience during that first year or two.
So I very consciously, as a big podcast listener myself, that's how I heard of Majority Report, obviously. It's conscious of not wanting to talk out of my ass, right? Like, I was 27 when that happened. I knew a fair amount. Like, I put work in when it comes to, like, educating myself. But I did basically, long story short, is I wanted to pick my spots wisely. I wanted to jump in when I had something to say, um, as opposed to forcing it and forcing something good to come out just by continuing to talk. And it became really easy over time. Really, I think Michael started doing Michael Thursdays, and it was Michael Mondays before then. But really, like, because there was less, like, Sam wasn't there, more people need to talk anyway, and like, that sort of forced me to be more verbal on the show. And it's weird, it sort of, it happened so gradually after then. Like, confidence sort of builds up. You realize what's worth jumping in on and what's not, how to wrap up a point quickly, which is always like my role. Like, it's a skill to talk in paragraphs, and I think it's one that I'm only developing. I think it takes some time, basically. And so I just try to get in with my 1 sentence, 2 sentence little jabs.
All right. That's interesting. Especially, this has been interesting during the 2016 election, or the whole cycle right there. Well, how did you feel about following the election, but following it in a way where you knew people were also following the election through you and what you were doing? What was that like?
Yeah, it was a weird mix, because obviously the primary, when Trump was beating up on the Republicans, was very funny.
Yeah.
Very funny time. But I even think, like, during that, if you go back and listen to those episodes, we were constantly, like, adding the disclaimer, like, but if this continues, we're all really fucked.
Yes.
Right. And of course it did continue. You know, it's interesting, like especially like such a massive change in people's imagination of what's possible in the negative sense.
Yeah.
I don't think people understood. I think there was a little bit of sense of like there's no way Trump could win. That um it was interesting to go through that with folks on the other half of it. Like I still remember the first show after Trump won, and I mean that it's a wild time. Like I don't know. I still don't know if we've reacted. Like I walked out of the first thing I do when I open the door in the morning is I saw a woman walking down the street crying into her hand, and um because yeah, I don't know. Like it's been interesting. Like we've gone from um like the show's definitely changed over the course. Like, you know, for instance, like Cliff Schecter used to be on every Friday.
Yeah.
Um,
I haven't heard from
that
him in years.
and it's because you know it's not the same
Yeah.
outlook politically, right? Um, and you know, it's interesting, like, and how we see the show is like Middle Report's not trying to out left wing anybody. It's just trying to get people like under the wing of the left, and I invented that just off the top of my head. But like right, like I honestly like um when people say that they've moved on from the Majority Report and they moved left up from it, right? That sounds to me, it's like, well, which way have you moved left? Did you move left from like now you're listening to further left wing podcasts? Which case, like that's cool.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not like you move left because you're organizing in your community or at your workplace, right? Like
Yeah.
that's like real. And so it's been interesting, like kind of navigating um that sort of thing, because I feel like there's been a I don't know, like there seemed to be a little bit of a scene under Trump of like, and I don't know, like I'm not trying to criticize the like podcast in general, but I don't know, like I just say like, yeah, I don't know what I'm trying to say there. But it's been interesting with like frankly there was no other shows like 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Like there was like TYT, David Pakman, the Majority Report, and like some other ones I can't even
Kyle
remember. Like
Kalinske was around.
Klinsky
Secular
was
talk.
around. That's
Yeah.
true. Yes. And but I'm trying to think like none of those are like Marxist, right?
No, no.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. That just wasn't that at all, and it's been interesting to see that develop, and I think that's extremely welcome and necessary.
Yeah.
Like to the extent that like I think the more, but it's been also interesting to see like who's like that is new to like I said, like I started reading Marx in undergrad, but didn't really get into like really like reading Capital, for instance, until I was unemployed out of grad school, and had like some extra time. Um, and I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see how durable that is and what's going to be like, you know, moved on from as and what's going to be actually like, I guess, influential on the left.
Yeah, like whenever like before I found the Majority Report, like I wasn't even on like the internet like before college because I had dial up at home. So if
Right.
I was online, it was like to read a news article or to read Wikipedia, which I did plenty of. But I watched TV. If I wanted to watch the news, I mostly watch like Democracy Now, Free Speech TV, that stuff. Like Tom Hartman, loved Tom Hartman. Watched
Oh
Tom
yeah.
Hartman all the time growing up.
Yep.
And you know, Democracy Now. What other stuff was on there? Bill Press, David Pakman. That's where I first heard of David Pakman because he was on Free Speech TV
Right.
back then. Still is too. But you know, that was the bulk of what I was listening to back then until I got, you know, was living on campus, had Wi-Fi, and was able to look up new stuff. And I'd heard of the Young Turks, but I still never really got into the Young Turks. I think I tried watching them, and like maybe I'll still watch a clip of them like every now and again, but I never really got too into them. I was into Jimmy Dore for a little while. As we all have been at some point. But you know, but after a while, it was just like, okay, Majority Report. I think I even got like eventually I got into Chapo Trap House and stuff like that. And there's the Michael Brooks
Chapo was
show.
like
Yeah.
that was this big sea change. Like I remember,
Yes. Yeah.
Chapo, like those. It was such a. It seems so like cliche or like trite to say, but like just them making fun of Ross Douthat for like 45 minutes. That was so and everyone does that on podcasts now, right?
Yeah.
But like that was so fresh at that time. Yeah, like I mean, it's great.
Yeah, that was, oh wow, that was something. Like I don't listen to Chapo as much as I did like 2 years ago, year and a half ago, I guess. But like that their show is like listening to them was something because I was like, oh, these guys are like really like aggressive and blunt and out there with what they're saying. Like I wish I knew I wish this had existed when I was like, you know, 14, 15, 16, even though I don't know if I would have been able to appreciate it the same way back then, but like
yeah, it's tough because
because like I was like at that time, like I knew, like, hearing them criticize, any infinite number of figures from like the Bush era and stuff like that, and hear them talk about the histories of some of these people. Like, I think one podcast they had last year was talking about the history of like H.W. Bush and him being FBI directors. Like, hearing them talk about that stuff and the way they do it is just like this is good.
CIA.
Yeah,
Yeah.
CIA,
Well, that's
FBI. Yeah,
right. No, but you're exactly right. Like that's the thing is about Chapo is like people get mad at them for a take or whatever, I guess, but like those guys are all I think brilliant, but more importantly than that, they're all very fluent in history. Like
yes,
you can tell they take their time to like they've been following this stuff, they've been reading back into stuff, and I like that's something I really respect in people, and it's so evident in them too. Like that's why they're able to do it. And that's why it's not the greatest show to like recommend to people who aren't that into politics,
yes,
because
yes.
it requires a fluency already,
Mm-hmm.
like right. And that's and when you have that, then seeing somebody like operate that the way they do is it's very engaging. But
Yeah.
like I tried to recommend it to people who are just kind of like dabbling in politics, and it's a little bit much. I think.
Yeah, because like I like that's the other reason why I like that show, because like not only are they like talking about stuff that like I know about or have known about or learned about or whatever, but also I learn a lot from them as well, because like
Mhm.
I'm also a history major, so I'm always reading about stuff. And I've learned probably a lot from that from listening to their podcasts over the years that I didn't know before. And it's like it's good stuff, like. And yeah,
Yeah.
other shows like Pod Damn America, with Jake Flores and Anders Lee. um but yeah, so what made you start Literary Hangover?
Literary hangover. So I had an English degree and a communications degree in undergrad, and then I did technology and society and master's degree in media studies for NYU. And the most interesting thing to me really is the mix of mythology and actual history. And I feel like it's really fundamental to like mythology. I think of, and literature is basically a sort of uh, how that mythology is expressed, right? And that's if I would love if the world was a socialist sort of utopia, and all I could do was read history. Like deep down, that's why I went to grad school. Like I wanted to be a professor, really.
Hmm.
I think of myself more as an observer than an activist, to be honest. And so or at least by nature. And so that's like, I love that sort of study, really. Like, and so that's why literary hangover is probably the thing I'll be doing for a long time.
Have you ever decided to read into Huey Long's book, Every Man a King?
I've not. Tell me about it.
I haven't read it yet. I might, I don't know. But I've recently been reading, learning about Huey Long. I don't know why I'd been taking forever to like get in him, or how I haven't like fell into reading about him before, because you know who Huey Long is, right?
I've
Former.
heard the name, but I don't know
Oh,
Huey
okay.
Long history too
So
super.
he was the governor, in a way, the forever governor of Louisiana,
Right.
late 20s, early 30s ish. Um, and he was like, in a way, kind of like a left-wing tyrant.
Right. Right.
And, ran the state with, I would say, more than just an iron fist. He was pretty wild, but he did a lot of good for Louisiana, paved a lot of roads, built a lot of dirt roads, funded the reason why LSU, Louisiana State University, exists in the way that it does today is because of him.
Right.
um let's see. And he is the reason, essentially, why the second part of the New Deal ended up passing,
Okay.
because he laid out a manifesto called, like, Share Our Wealth is what it was called. And it had, I can't remember the specifics of it, but basically it was a lot of different plans that he laid out in it that he said he wanted to enact if he ran for president. And it scared FDR and made FDR pass what ended up being in the New Deal.
Right.
So, like, it's he's like really interesting, and he ended up dying like in his 30s, like age 38. He is assassinated. But he was like a really interesting guy. There's like a whole debate about whether or not he was a fascist or like a Stalinist wannabe or
Yeah. Yeah.
something
I've
of
heard
that
some of
nature.
that.
Like, but like, in reality, I wouldn't say he was a fascist. He was definitely on the left, but he wasn't a socialist, because he debated, what was the guy's name? Norman, the guy who was the leader of the Socialist Party in the 30s. I can't think of his name right now. It's Norman something or something Norman. He debated
Mhm.
him on the merits of his share a wealth plan and socialism, because, like, yeah, but he wasn't particularly like ideological. Like, he didn't really care what people
Right.
called him. But like, if you were to place him anywhere, you'd pretty much just say he was like an authoritarian social democrat who was like
Right.
very vindictive against the people who got in his way. um but yeah, but he wrote a book, and he wrote a couple of books actually, but Every Man a King, I think is the one that seems most interesting to me. I haven't read it yet, but I've read parts of it.
Hmm.
It seems interesting. But yeah, and tell me about your time on the Michael Brooks show and how you ended up becoming part of that.
Yeah. Well, Michael and I worked. As soon as I started on Majority Report, he asked me, like, in the first few months, to produce a show we did before TMBS called Two Dope Bros.
Mm-hmm.
Or Two Dope. Damn. Two Dope.
Two dope
Two Dope
boys.
Boys in a podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking Woke Bros.
Yeah.
um, and with Phil McKenzie. And so I produced that for, I can't remember exactly how, a year and a half maybe it was.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was right around, I don't remember exactly when it was, around the time Trump either started, it's in the primary, the general election, or after Trump won. But we realized, we don't really want to talk about this. We got to be talking about politics than what we were on Two Dope Boys, which is sort of like a mix of politics, pop culture, and branding. And so we just did the politics, left-wing politics, basically like Majority Report, but a little bit more focused on U.S. intervention abroad, anti-communism, particularly, that sort of stuff. And yeah, so it just seemed natural to start. Basically, we were doing Two Dope Boys on Tuesdays. We just started doing Michael Brooks on Tuesdays instead. So for like 5 years, every Tuesday was spent with Michael. And we at that point there wasn't, Kalinske was out, but as far, and Majority Report and Pac-Man, like we said, the ones we already mentioned, but it's weird. We started it as a podcast, kind of like in the this was around when we did Patreon, because Chapo was having so much success on Chapo, or on Patreon. And we slowly morphed into a YouTube show, which was interesting. And just because I think we were doing it on YouTube, and YouTube is where their new eyeballs are. And that, I mean, yeah, I did a good run, about 150 shows, and the live shows were the funnest, the most fun I had.
Yeah, I remember because I started watching the Majority Report like right whenever you guys started doing the Michael Brooks show. Like it was like the week before, a couple weeks before, because I remember Michael Brooks talking about it on the Majority Report before it happened, and I think I watched the first episode when it streamed, and then like I didn't watch the next couple, and I like friended Michael on Facebook, and he told me to check it out, and I said, okay, I'll catch up on the other episodes and I'll start watching it. And then I caught up on the other two, and then I started watching it every week, every Tuesday. I just watch it every Tuesday. I think at what is 6 p.m. East or Central Time, yeah. And that's I did pretty much every Tuesday for about 3 or 4 years there. And that was that show. So the Michael Brooks show, it taught me some history, not necessarily so much about America, but about other countries. And you guys did a little bit of coverage of the UK, and I'd always followed UK politics since like the Scottish referendum in 2014. So
Okay.
y'all's coverage of the UK stuff was pretty cool as well, and the coverage of Lula in Brazil and the Venezuela stuff, that also got me kind of interested in South American history. I still haven't really read too much about it, but like it still interests me, and I look into it from time to time. And that show like played a decent role in my forming of politics over the years, and was really good. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, it was an educational experience. And that was the nice thing about it, is like I Michael would always have something great to discuss every week. It was a lot less work. It was basically just
yeah,
an educational experience for me that I got paid to be a part of. Yeah.
yeah. I remember one of my favorite moments on Michael Brooks show. I probably look at this clip or like watch this episode at least once every couple of months. It's the one where y'all had Anna in the studio, and she talked about Dave Rubin, and it was what was it? It was the one where Dave Rubin went on that show, and they played the clip of her criticizing him, say he was a fraud.
Mhm.
And at the end of the of y'all talking about Dave Rubin, you played the drop of My brain is still in recovery mode.
Oh, yeah.
And she hadn't heard it yet. And she was just like, wait, what? And then Michael just started laughing. And that was so funny. She couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
That's one of the funniest moments on the Michael Burke show. I die
Yeah, it was
every time I
great.
see that.
Yeah, the studio
Oh
stuff was so fun.
yeah. Um yeah, that show was great. So tell me about how Left Reckoning came about.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's really just we realized um we wanted to continue on the sort of spirit in a way that we could, and that's really all there's to it. David and I realized we liked working together, and we had all these people um, that wanted us to continue doing something. So we just decided, and we came up with a pretty, a lot of it's David's idea. Like he was thinking about something with Left Reckoning for a while, and when he told me, I was like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I like the concept of the show where it's two leftists from two rural states with y'all's perspective on politics, and you guys center that as part of the show, and that's really cool. Like,
Yeah, we're both sensitive to being labeled as Brooklyn podcasters, and even
yeah.
though I'm still here, that's not how I think of myself.
Yeah, because what was it? Because that's like the thing that I think about whenever I think about politics, is how that's why I ended up starting my shows, because it's 2018 and the Majority Report, I think you guys interviewed Cynthia Nixon when she ran for governor, and Nomiki whenever she ran for what was it, public advocate. And I think TYT, they interviewed someone who was running for Senate out there in California. And my whole thing, I was thinking at the time, was like, well, we have like progressive candidates out here in Oklahoma who are running for stuff, like, and no one's going to interview them. Like,
Yeah,
and then, and even if we don't necessarily have like progressive candidates, we have like some like decent Democratic candidates who may or may not have a chance at winning, and no one's giving them any like platform to speak. So I figured someone needs to start a show and interview these people and talk about these things going on in Oklahoma. And that was kind of why I ended up starting my show, because I know the people who I'm thinking about in my head who were progressive candidates or Democratic candidates who are good and don't have any other kind of platforms to, amplify their voices. And I have time and I think I could do this. And that's why I ended up starting my show. So it's nice
yeah,
to see other people who are in, at least come from similar backgrounds as I am, coming from a rural area in red state, as a leftist with my perspective. So it's really cool to see that.
yeah. And I think with that sort of thing, what you're doing is really important. Like we need a lot more of that, and it's tough because it's like I finding navigating the algorithms and shit like that is difficult, but like I think consistency, and if you can tap into a community, it really helps.
Yeah. So tell me about your hatred for cars.
Yeah, so I moved to New York. I got accepted to two grad schools, NYU and Pepperdine, which is in Malibu. And I chose New York because I didn't want to have to deal with a car. I'd experienced carless life in London for a summer, and it was amazing. Public transportation is fucking amazing if you like to, go out and get drunk and stuff like that, and or just not have to worry about car troubles, right?
Yeah.
Like, or like what that fucking light means that keeps coming on. Like I so that's my personal hatred for it. A person I know I do. I love driving as much as anybody. Also, like I used to do it just for fun and boredom when I lived in North Dakota. You just drive, just go for a drive and listen to fucking radio, and uh, even though I knew that that was bad for the environment, it's still fun.
Yeah.
Um, so like I get the appeal to it, but I think if you zoom out and you look at the effect that the automobile has had on any city you name, like it's just a travesty. And the cities that developed, like you can see when they developed before the automobile and after the automobile. New York has still a lot of great urban environments, like great city. Like you go to like a place like Phoenix, no offense, like I've had a lot of fun in Phoenix, but like this giant just grid in the middle of a desert because it's in strip malls, right? Like, and we're all, I think, a lot more atomized because of the automobile, just in terms of like suburban, the way suburban sprawl, like all that stuff. And not to mention like the highways right through like all these old communities that like, like Kansas City, the downtown Kansas City was fucking vibrant, amazing place. And then you look at it now, it's like 7 highways.
Yeah.
And that stuff, I think everyone should be upset about that. Not, and then also it's a, you can't do both. Yeah, like people think you can do cars and public transportation. Like, guess who's fucking winning that? You gotta just affirmatively say we're going to invest in public transportation, and this like giant like suburbs with cul-de-sac stuff, that's done. Like, sorry. And that's not a political winner.
Yeah.
That's a position I hold that I like to elaborate because I don't have any plans to ever run for office. But I mean, that's my general position on cars.
So what do you mean we can't do both? Like, I'm sure like somebody in New York City drives, no? Like
They do, but that's the thing,
yeah.
is like there should be there should be a lot less frankly. Like, we started making streets into bike lanes and pedestrian walks. There's to be a lot more of that, a lot more, a lot.
Wait. So like you guys in New York City, you guys have roads that aren't even like roads, they're just bike lanes and sidewalks.
They were roads, and then during the pandemic they've been experimenting with closing them down to turn them into like bikeways.
Oh, okay, I
Or
see. Yeah.
and that is money every single time. And you have to make a choice when like these cities do make a choice. They decide, okay, we're going to allow this building here, but we're only allowed to allow you to put 8 units because that's the number of parking spaces you can have, right? That requirement should be out the window. You should be able to make like 24 units and fuck the parking. And if people need to park, they can spend, I think they can be super rich and find limited parking spots. But generally, it should be buses, and it should be walk to the subway. And when you don't do that, then you have what you have now in Brooklyn, which is, especially during the pandemic, it's been people have been, because like all the cars are getting bought up. There's been some in New York. I think there's a lot of rich people around here that didn't have a car before, but now that the pandemic hit, they need one to like get out of the city on weekends and stuff like that. And it sucks. Like it's so congested, and like I think you just, and that's because you keep doubling down on cars, and I think it ruins the city. And there's counter examples. You look at Amsterdam; they used to have a lot more. I think all these cities could do more. Frankly, I've been to Amsterdam. There's a lot, even too many cars there for my taste. But they make a lot of stuff bike lanes, and bikes and buses are just more efficient in terms of moving people miles per hour. If we're just going to talk about Elon Musk efficiency here, right? When they do those models of how many people does this transport per minute, cars are just not good. They're really like inefficient. One person often in a giant box, right? Like these are not. It's and we accept that lack of efficiency. Because one, that's the only way to fucking do it in most of the country, which, so I understand why, like if you live in Bismarck, it's in North Dakota, it's like, I need a fucking car. You're not going to do buses around here, right? But in the places that can do it, like you need to you need to force them to do it and build out. Because like again, like there's nothing more depressing than look at Los Angeles and see that they had a bigger rail capacity for commuter rail in the 1920s than they will in the 2020s, because that stuff's been dug up and it's all clusterfuck traffic now.
That's interesting. I never thought about it that way. Because like I see places like Oklahoma City. It's no New York, but they have some public transportation, buses mostly. I think they're like contracted out with some private business or something like that.
Right.
And they, if I'm not mistaken, there's only like certain times and days that they run, and there's not many of them. And they also don't go everywhere in the city either. Also, Oklahoma City is zoned weird. Like it's land wise, Oklahoma City is like almost like one of the biggest cities in the country, just because like it's only like a city of like 700,000 people, but like the way that it's zoned, it's like a giant chunk of Oklahoma County, which is like the middle county, and then it's part of Cleveland County, and then it's also part of Canadian County, and there's also a part of it like a mile or two in the county I live in, which is Potawatomi County. It's zoned weird, so like it makes it like weird to actually plot out something like this, but like they make small incremental moves to make public transportation and bikes as well more viable. But like, so are you saying that if they were like really, really serious about it, they would put like way bigger investment in it, like instead of just
yes,
like
what I'm saying is
like double the capacity that they currently have?
More than that, it's more than just a transportation problem. It becomes a urban planning problem.
Yes.
So you need to basically build, like Fargo's building a giant tower not a giant tower for North Dakota speaking, it's a tall building. And there needs to just be a lot more of this centralized, frankly, and the state needs to do it, right? Centralized planning where you have these giant places. So you don't need to go as far, because the problem is like a lot of these things are too wide to make work for the amount of populations that they are, right? And so we can decide if we're going to continue investing in suburban road repairs, or if we're going to like start doing things a little bit more sustainably and basically have cheap living available for people in urban centers. And that needs to be made and created, right? Like you're not going to bus stop your way to that stuff being created, right? Like it requires a real activist role in development of the cities, and we're not, of course. We do not have. I don't even think you could squad. If the squad was I don't even think they're there yet. But I mean that's what I think. Like like that's what we'd be doing if we wanted to avoid climate change. And I feel like that's what we're going to be forced into to adapt to it.
Yeah, because like I remember someone made a tweet, and people say this kind of stuff all the time, where they'll say like, "Oh, we should have like a gas tax, but we should use the money from the gas tax to fund public transportation." And I'm like, I get the point, but like you can't just like do that.
You need to,
like
you can't technocratically do this. You have to take money from rich people to do all this stuff. Right?
And even if you were to like do this, like you need to already have the infrastructure in place before you start saying, okay, we're going to tax you for driving. Like you can't just say we're going to tax you for driving, then build it. It's like, no, like you can't,
of course,
do that. And then also like if you do this, you would be like, I mean, sure, like 99% of the country drives, but like you'd be hurting a lot of different industries by doing this. Gas tax, like it just isn't feasible at all. Like you just shouldn't do it. Like if you're going to do public transportation, just do that. And then if you do it correctly and you do it well, people won't have to drive cars as much anymore, and then the problem solves itself. But you don't do it by penalizing people for the problem and then say that you're going to use the penalty to solve the problem. It's just
No,
doesn't
yeah,
work that way. Yeah.
yeah, that's wanting to balance the scales when they start off imbalanced. You need in anything like this, it's going to disrupt people's lives. The only way to make them accept it, people will take on sacrifices as long as they know that's been done in an equitable way that's leading to a better future. And
Yeah.
the best way to do that is to make sure the people that are whining about the most are the rich people. And of course, that's why the rich people own both political parties,
Yes.
because they don't want to allow that to happen.
Yeah, because I was thinking, because I was specifically talking about this like in reference to, like Oklahoma or like states that have like a lot of like rural areas. Like you're just not going to get a lot of these people on board with public transportation, because for them it's like the nearest place that they have to go is a 10, 15, 20 minute drive. And like the they're not gonna be so like on board with taking a bus to get there or a subway to get there. You're gonna have
Yeah,
to
but
like, yeah, go ahead.
we're talking to Kowalski from Nebraska, and it's like, I think and my mom comes from a small town, and a lot of those small towns are going to be disappearing. Like the
Yeah.
problem is like from especially a policy standpoint, a national policy, people don't care. Like, okay,
Yeah.
you don't care, but like I think what needs to happen is a vision where like county seats particularly um are given funds that and we should connect the county seats somehow. But uh and then that leaves these places that aren't county seats like to sort of live and die on their own. But that's better than letting every place just die on their own, which is seemingly what we're doing in rural America now.
Yeah, because like I live near, what is it, 14th or 13th biggest city in Oklahoma, which is still only like 30,000 people, which isn't a lot
Right.
technically, I guess. And they don't have any kind of public transportation. I think they could, and there's also been talks of having some sort of like train or subway type thing connecting some of the other cities that are more inside of the Oklahoma City metro area, like I think Bell City, Midwest City, Edmond, OKC, Norman have talked about something like that in the past. I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but they've
Right.
talked about that. I remember I was talking to some kids the other day about, because I'm a substitute teacher. So I was talking to them about, I don't know how trains came up, but we were talking about trains or something. And I asked them if I think we were talking about like the UK or something. I don't remember. But like it was, I asked them if any of them had been on a train before. And I think only two of them had. And one of them said they had been on a train, the Amtrak, here in Oklahoma City. And then another one said they were born in the UK, so they had been on one whenever they were in the UK. And that was like
Right.
10 years ago, 15 years ago. And I told them, I said there's people like that live in like New York, like in Europe, like that kind of travel is like normal to those people. They've never even been in a car or driven a car. Like they just get on the subway, which is like a train or something like that. Like that's like, and like most Americans couldn't even fathom the idea of going on a train unless it's like something special. And like I was telling them that and they thought it was pretty interesting, and like it's not anything they could ever get on board with. Like it's just like unimaginable to them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I remember
yeah,
when I first went to DC, I had the exact same experience, first time on a subway.
yeah. I rode the Amtrak, I think, to Texas one day and back when I was like 11 or 12. It was interesting. I liked it.
It's
Yeah.
Amtrak's like I rode it to Seattle. It's cool, but it's like not cheap,
Yeah, it's not,
and
no.
it's very uncomfortable. Like
Yeah.
it's literally not less. It's as expensive as a plane ticket, and you get there 10 times slower.
Yeah. But yeah, but like that's that's something that like America's just so far behind on. Like it's crazy. Like,
Yeah.
oh wow. Um, but yeah, last question I have here is what kind of music do you listen to?
So I gotta say, like last 4 years, especially, I haven't I haven't been finding new music. I'll tell you that. My prime time of following music closely was probably like 2007 to 2012. Um, like Block Party, Arctic Monkeys, those sorts of like British indie rock bands were my big main favorites, like White Stripes and stuff like that, Strokes. Um, and I could go and honestly, like electro, Aphex Twin, and James Blake. I got into um, British British people make good music. That's one thing I've found. Even like grime is like my favorite kind of like one of my favorite kinds of rap.
Yeah.
And like, there's really musical folks over there. I'd say that's my, but again, like it's been sad because I still have Spotify, but everything I listen to is like, the band Mew. It's like Danish sort of prog
Mm-mm.
band. Weird, strange thing, but like I've been just re-listening to music I listened to 10, 15 years ago.
Wow. That's gonna be me 10 years from now. I'm just gonna be
Yep.
listening to Limp Bizkit and Corn over and over again.
Exactly. And you remember where you were when you first listened to them, like
Yeah,
how much you've
like
grown since.
yeah, like for me, sometimes like there's some songs now where it's like, okay, I don't want to listen to this too much because I feel like it'll ruin like the feeling that I once had the first handful of times I listened to it when I was like a kid or something. Like,
Hmm.
like what is it? There's this one, there's like one Limp Bizkit song specifically. It's track 2 on Significant Other, the album behind me. It's called Just Like This, and it was the first Limp Bizkit CD I bought from Best Buy of all places. And I remember listening to that CD every morning for like a month or two my sophomore year whenever I woke up, and listening to that song like puts me in that like feeling, that mindset, like I'm 15 years old again. I'm a sophomore in
Right.
high school. I'm about to go to band practice in the morning and play my trumpet, and like it's stuff like that. Like some songs will bring me back to that, and I'm like, okay, I can't listen to this song this much. Like I gotta like listen to like once every month or every other month or something, because I can't lose that feeling, because I gotta keep that. Or
Right.
and there's some other songs that are like that too, but usually they're usually some stuff that I just don't listen to as much anymore. But yeah. um
Yeah,
what
no, the
was
best
it?
feeling is when you forgot a band for like 5 years and you're like, oh yeah, I really like that. A few of the
Yeah,
songs. That's where
yeah,
I'm at now.
yeah, like what was it? Oh, like Green Day, I think is what that's like for me, because I had a Green Day phase for one summer for like 3 months in 2012 where I listened to this summer. I listened to, it was Dookie by Green Day, Meteora by Linkin Park, and what was the Beastie Boys album? License to Ill by the Beastie Boys. Those were like the 3 albums I listened to the most that summer. And I think I bought a few more Green Day CDs before the end of that year, and I didn't really get into them as much as I did Dookie. But like occasionally, if someone mentions Green Day or like a song from that album, I'll like, oh, I gotta go listen to that album now. Because like I like don't listen to Green Day that often anymore, but I still really like that Dookie album.
Right.
And like I think Burnout is my favorite Green Day song, which is the first song on Dookie. And yeah. Um what else is there? But yeah, what just you said Arctic Monkeys. I like some Arctic Monkey songs. Trying to think of it. Why'd you only call me when you're high? That's them,
That's good.
right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
him. Yeah, them.
Let me think. There's a handful of those songs I like because they were also popular whenever I was in high school. Do I want to know? Are you mine? Yeah,
Yeah.
those
Yeah,
are
they
some good
started
ones.
their first album dropped when I was a junior in high school.
Yeah, they've been around for a while. They're one of those bands that I think they're more popular than I think they were at the time, and but like it also kind of like amazes me when I hear someone who's younger than me say they listen to them. I'm like, wait, you
Yeah,
listen to Arctic Monkeys? Like what? Like, okay, that's cool.
yeah, I agree with that. Yeah,
Because like I don't think I knew anyone like I wasn't really that into them. I just knew like the popular songs because they were on the radio, but I didn't really know anyone like when I was in high school that actually listened to them.
they were big because of MySpace. They're like one of that they were signed off MySpace, so they got a lot of buzz
Yeah,
that way back in like 2006 or 5, maybe it was even.
yeah, yeah. As did many bands. Like I think
Yeah,
I'm more into like the metal stuff. So whenever I think of, I was even on MySpace, but I was old enough to be on MySpace. But I wasn't on MySpace or Facebook back then. But I know that a lot of bands they got popular off of there, like what was it? Suicide Silence, Bring Me the Horizon, Asking Alexandria. A lot of those like metalcore, deathcore bands they got pretty popular off of the last era of somewhat mainstream-ish metal bands. Um,
yeah, back
but
when
yeah,
like Dimmu Borgir.
yeah,
um I don't know. I don't know if they were from MySpace, but I like those. I never got really into metal as like a like scene, but like I did like Gojira,
oh okay, yeah,
Mastodon, like those sorts of bands every once in a while. But I always like White Stripes and like those sorts of like indie rock where they can really play guitar,
yeah,
where they have a range of like and I don't want to say all metal doesn't have any range in sort of like tonality and like aggression levels, but a lot of it doesn't.
yeah,
And I like how Jack White can go from like an acoustic song to like Little Cream Soda or something like that super heavy stuff. But
yeah,
anyways, it's been great talking to you, Gregory.
yeah. I was about to what was it? Oh yeah, Gojira. I never really got into Gojira or Mastodon, but they're good bands. I'm trying to think. Were you ever into like Meshuggah or Periphery? Because it's also kind of like in that lane of metal.
Yeah, no, I heard those names, but never. I can't name a song.
Okay, but yeah. But yeah, it's been really great talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on. Where can we find you on social media, and where can we find all of the different projects that are part of what Sam Cedar calls the Matt Lechian universe?
You can just go over to at MATTLECH on Twitter, and all those projects are in my bio there. So go check that out, folks.
All right.